What is up, my people? Let's use now our law of cosines to find some missing angles. Here we go. So, the important thing, check to first see if you have a set of opposites. We don't. Law of sines isn't useful. Law of cosines is. All right. You got to know which angle you're finding. Because in terms of our law of cosines equation, the angle you're finding is going to be big C, regardless of what letter it has. So in our case here, we're looking for angle D. Let's get you on a pen. All right, so I'm going to make a note to myself. This is big C I'm finding, meaning that across from it, this 10 is little c. That matters. You got to make sure you're putting the numbers in the right spots. So as far as our setup, general law of cosines. Okay, let's put in what we know, solve for what we don't. I know that C is 10. It doesn't matter which of these is A and which of these is B, so you can use whichever order you prefer. What we don't know this time is that angle. Now here it does matter that you simplify things a little bit first. So we've got 100, and then 26 squared plus 19 squared is 1,037. And then 2 times 26 times 19 is 988 times the cosine of C. Again, fight the temptation to do anything else. This is as simple as this gets. So next up, I want to be able to isolate the cosine C so that we can then use an inverse cosine and find out how many degrees that angle is. So let's get cosine C by itself. Subtract the 1,037, both sides of the equal sign. So 100 minus 1,037, negative 937 is equal to negative 988. Don't forget that negative stays in front of the 988. Cosine C. Then division by the negative 988, division by the negative 988. Another thing I'm going to need you to do for me, fight the temptation to turn this into a decimal, especially a rounded decimal. Because as I look at negative 937 divided by negative 988, it's just not nice. And even if you go all the way out here, the decimal really continues on and on. So I'm just going to leave it as this fraction, 937 over 988. The negative signs can reduce, but please leave it as that fraction. So the cosine of the angle I care about is 937 over 988. That means then that the measure of the angle I care about is the inverse cosine of 937 over 988. So throw that in a calculator. Let's see what happens. Cosine 937 over 988 ends up being about 18.5 degrees. So I'm going to say this is approximately 18.5 degrees. And then ballpark it. I mean, this angle looks pretty small, so 18.5 seems reasonable. Let's recap what we did. No angles, so no set of opposites. Know which angle you want to find. That's the one that has to be the angle we use as big C in the law of cosines, which means across from it is the side you use as little c. When you're simplifying, you want to get the cosine by itself so that you can then do an inverse cosine and find which angle has that particular ratio. Let's go again. As per usual, I would like you to pause and then unpause when you're ready to check things. Making a note here, this is the angle I care about, so that's my big C, making that my little c. Okay. So 18 squared plus 12 squared gets me 468. 2 times 18 times 12 is 432. And again, stop here. This is as simple as this gets because the 432 is multiplied by the cosine. Let's then do some subtraction. Okay. 784 minus 468. 316 is negative 432 cosine of C. Divide. Okay, now this fraction, because it's both even, it might reduce a little bit. I'm just going to use my Desmos. 316 divided by negative 432. Turn that into a reduced fraction. Negative 79 over 108. So my cosine of C is negative 79 over 108. Therefore, my actual angle C is we're still equal at this point, inverse cosine of negative 79 over 108, which is approximately, use my other calculator this time, negative 79 divided by 108, about 137 degrees. And again, it seems reasonable. It's a pretty big angle. It's certainly more than 90. So we end up with a more than 90 there. Now, you may be wondering how your calculator does cosines of angles that are bigger than 90. That's actually something we'll talk about later in the course. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so recap. The angle you want has to be big C. Therefore, the side across from it has to be little c. And then do some algebra and inverse trig to solve for that missing angle. One more for practice. You can pause, or hey, if you want to, you could try and erase me. I'm pretty fast. So let's set things up. It's 100 plus 244. 20 times 12 would be 240. And 169 minus 244. There's the 244. Don't forget that minus, that negative, that stays in front of the 240 there. So when you then divide 75 over 240, I use my handheld calculator here. So negative 75 divided by negative 240. Notice I'm using my negative. I'm using this negative button down at the bottom. I'm going to turn that into a reduced fraction, 5/16. Okay, so the cosine of the angle C is 5/16. Therefore, C is the inverse cosine of 5/16, which is about 71.8 degrees. And again, give it a check. This angle looks to be a little less than 90. 71.8 to my mind seems reasonable. So again, the biggie is making sure that you get the side C chosen correctly. It's got to be the one across from the angle you care about. The other two, the A and the B, doesn't matter which of those is which, but you got to get that C chosen properly.